Hey, Coach Dave Dow here. I just watched the new Jake Gyllenhaal Roadhouse, and I was a huge fan of Patrick Swayze's Roadhouse, and I'm going to give my review of the new movie and compare it to the old one. There are some minor spoilers in here. I'm going to try to not give off too much. First off, I enjoyed the movie. I mean, there's been mixed reaction because there's quite a bit of difference between the old and the new, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of good movie-ized MMA fight scenes. And Conor McGregor was great as kind of Conor McGregor. A little bit a comic book version of him, but pretty close. But that was very good. So, first off, the basic differences between the original. If you haven't seen the original film, go watch that before watching this review. So, in the original film, Dalton is a professional cooler, which is a kind of bouncer, not the doormen who are the huge ones who try to intimidate people into not doing dumb stuff, but a person who, once stuff has gone down, he gets in and is able to handle the situation. So, he gets hired to go work at the Double Deuce, and because it is a horribly run place with patrons that are more interested in fights than having a good time. So the owner wants to clean it up and he wants to put some money in it and have a good thing. So Don has to go in there and train the proper bouncers. He assesses the situations, gets rid of the riffraff. Unfortunately, some of the riffraff is associated with the local town. The town, and this is actually where it also is somewhere new, whereas the town is kind of run by a guy who's come back from, I think it was the Korean War, and he set up shop and he brought money into the town, and his son is a kind of a criminal, and they kind of do what they want in the town. When things get really bad, Dalton calls his mentor, Wade Garrett, who is played by Sam Elliott, and who's also been like in the business forever, taught Dalton everything he knows, also taught him martial arts. Dalton and him we go way back, and it's more of a traditional martial art movie. You got your karate kung fu moves in there. Choreography is a bit dated. Back in the day when I first watched it as a teenager, I loved it. Storyline, what I like much better, storyline in the original one is the fact he's a professional cooler, and he has some great lines there. One of my favorite ones, pain don't hurt, be nice until it's not time not to be nice. It's chock full of different sayings I've used over the years in my martial art classes. So I love that movie for that. So in the new one, Dalton is a UFC fighter. Literally got not just MMA, but got all the way to the UFC. Something happens and now he's down on his luck. He's actually does this. I won't go into how he's making his money, but he's at the very bottom of his life, borderline suicidal. He's thrown his life away, and this woman comes who now in Florida instead of the South is open up a bar has a bar open called Roadhouse, literally two words, road and house, in the Florida Keys, and instead of the South, and she wants to have an MMA fighter as a bouncer to clean up the area. And so it's very different feel for the bar. But and she's rather than getting a professional bouncer to help out her bouncers, she decides to go for the MMA fighter. Actually, a washed-up MMA fighter and even though she's having trouble, she's going to pay him $20,000 for a week's work. So for somebody who's never bounced before. So those are the two different premises. Now, some of the biggest differences. Obviously, the owners are race and gender swapped, which is no big deal. Different feel for it. One's an older guy who's opened a bar, put his kind of life savings into it. The newer one, she's kind of a young, upcoming, and very different. He's more laid back. She's more go-getter. The ones that I didn't like was that there's no Sam Elliott character in the new one. There's no mentor for Dalton to help him out. Also, in the original one, you had the band player. I think his name was Sunshine Parker. He knows Dalton. Everybody knows Dalton in the first one. The second one, they know him for a different reason, but everybody knows him as a cooler, and the big line is, "I thought you'd be bigger," which is the funny part. And it comes up everywhere. In both movies, he dates a doctor. In the first one, he has to pursue her more. In the second one, she pursues him. And in the old one, also, it's the dad of the son is much more involved. He is Brad Wesley, and he is the one who's running the town. He's also sending the guys out to do what they feel like it. And he kind of has a protection racket going. There's no scene of when people start to stand up to him because of Dalton standing up to him at the bar. Like he destroys Red's paint shop and also the local car dealership. In the new one, there's none of that. There is, in the new one, he becomes friends with a daughter of a book owner who gives him a book on a local tree that's in the middle of the bridge. I think it was called Fred the Tree. And Dad has a day job, so she hangs out at the bookstore a lot. And she's kind of a tough kid for being a young girl who becomes good friends with Dalton. And they're the local ones who are standing up to, in this case, the father isn't really running things per se. He's in prison. It's the son. And in the new one, there's a specific reason they're targeting the bar. Whereas in the first one, it just, they were initially ruffians, and because of Dalton getting in their way, the bar gets more and more targeted. Whereas in this new movie, I won't give the reason necessarily. There's a specific reason they're going after the bar. Once again, the fight scenes were much better that's a big difference. The one I didn't like is the throat rip out in the old one, because that's an impossible movie. It doesn't exist. You couldn't do that with your fingers. We don't have claws. But in both movies, Dalton has a backstory he's not proud of, something he did. Those who've seen the old movie know what it is. I know it's a really old movie, 20, 30 years old, so I could spoil it. But just in case you haven't seen it, I'll leave that for later. And a new one, pardon me, I don't want to spoil it. So, and that's the big one is Conor McGregor in here isn't the son. Like, if they did a more closer remake, like a retelling of the original story, he would be the son. He's more of a hired gun to come after Dalton, which isn't necessarily bad. And as I said, I like the new movie, just it's a very different story. The cool thing is, next to the bookstore in the new movie, there is a store right next to it. I think it's a restaurant called the Double Deuce. So they kind of did that throwback to having the Double Deuce still in the movie. And I kind of, to me, the having the bar in the original one with down south, and it seemed like a good old, a dive bar with lots of fights. It made sense why there was fights going on. This is a much more upscale bar. Why there's fights going on and the bar getting trashed every night doesn't make as much sense. It's supposedly not a great town anymore, but everything looks upscale. All the people, like, either they needed to make it look like a real seedy area, which they didn't. I mean, the area where the bookstore is doesn't look great, but it's not really seedy. The bar is really nice, so that doesn't make sense. It should, in the original, when the first version of Double Deuce before he upgrades it is a crappy bar. It looks like it. In the new one, it's a beautiful bar. I mean, it's right on the water. It doesn't make sense why you'd have that element there, and you'd probably have, I mean, the sheriff has been bought off, but it's like, it just doesn't make as much sense in that regard. So I like both movies for the story and maybe probably just some nostalgia factor filling in there. I'd rate the older one higher for the characters, the enjoyment, probably rewatchability. For the pure fight scenes, and then I would give the newer one better. The final fight scene's a little drawn out, and I think the bad guy would have died a lot sooner. If you see, you'll see what I mean by that. So I do recommend both movies, but watch the first one first if you haven't. Then watch the new Jake Gyllenhaal one, and let me know what you think.